everyone. Welcome back to the TVBinges.com Pilot Roundtable, a Southgate Media Group podcast. I'm Kyle Tremblay, the editor of TVBinges.com, and I am joined as always by a fellow TV Binges writer. She's seated on her favorite television critic throne, ready to rain down judgment on unsuspecting pilots. It's Olivia Richards. Hello.
Yes, I'm like the Cersei Lannister of television reviews.
That's right. This is Judgment Day for us. Because there are no pilots premiering on network television in February, and so we are putting out an episode anyway. That is our year-end wrap-up episode for 2015. We're going to count down our favorite pilots of 2015. Now, you may ask why we are doing this 2 months late, and I would respond to you, stop asking so many questions.
There you go.
So that's it. That's our explanation. So Olivia and I have both independently, without discussing it with each other, come up with a list of our favorite 5 pilots, and we are going to count down from 5 to 1, taking turns, and we'll just talk about the shows that we liked the most that premiered in 2015. So before we start, how would you rate 2015 as a whole for network pilots? What are your thoughts, big picture, on the state of network pilots last year?
Ooh, that's a good question. So like on a scale of 1 to 10, how would I rate it?
Yeah, let's add a scale to it. I like scales.
Yeah, let's give a concrete numerical thing happening. Ooh, that's a good question. Honestly, 2015 was kind of a hit and a miss for me. Like, we had some really, really good ones, which, we're going to talk about our top 5 in, a couple minutes. So obviously it wasn't a complete bust. And then we had some really bizarre ones. There's quite a few that both of us were kind of just like shaking our heads and wondering what the heck happened. So over the year, I think it averaged out to probably about a 6.
I was going to say 6 as well. That was my number. I think it was not a disaster of a year. I think we got some good shows that we're going to talk about in this top 5, but not a banner year either for networks. Ratings are obviously dying across the boards, and it's causing networks to reevaluate the whole pilot process. We're definitely in an era of change for network TV, and I think networks are honestly just trying to sort of hold on during this weird period of very rapid change. So yeah, I'd say about a 6 is fair. Before we get into the top 5, I also do our really honestly, we're going to start with the biggest award, which is the Unintentional Comedy Award of 2015. This is the pilot, as any listener to our podcast knows, that I think more often than not, pilots end up being unintentionally funny, unless they're comedies, in which case they're usually not funny at all. But
funny how that works out.
But yeah, so this is the show that maybe like the bad show that brought us the most joy, or you could take it as the show that tried to be serious but was actually a comedy. Just the Unintentional Comedy Award, whatever it means to you. Olivia, what is your choice?
I really hope that we sync up on this and we get the same answer, because mine was The Slap.
The Slap, of course, the winner of the award.
The most bizarre thing where they took one isolated incident that was like literally a 5-second blip in a show and made it the entire premise of an entire network series.
Yes.
And it was beautiful.
It is the Unintentional Comedy Award for the year, for the last 5 years, and honestly for life. It is
forever.
I don't think anything will embody the concept of unintentional comedy as much as The Slap did. This is a show with a deathly serious tone that was played on the internet entirely for laughs. It's very rare that a show tonally can so completely misunderstand what it actually is. And so The Slap was a special little golden egg just for those of us who appreciate and watch all these dumb network pilots. That show made me laugh.
Oh, it was incredible.
So
Think noir meets hipster meets child abuse.
I was going to say meets child abuse. That was going to be my joke and you said it.
Oh my god, this is awesome. We're totally like brain twins right now.
With The Slap, I feel like we are completely simpatico on The Slap. I do want to give shout outs to the runners up this year. CSI Cyber.
Yes.
Which brought us Patricia Arquette, someone who just completely disinterested in everything that's being talked about, trying to carry a procedural. It also brought us Lil Bow Wow as a hacker. Can't forget that. And Secrets and Lies, if you'll remember.
Oh my god.
Brought us the most confounding performance I've ever seen with Juliette Lewis. as the sort of sour, pouty cop. No, I will never understand the choices she made in that role, which made it wonderful unintentional comedy. And of course, Zoo.
I was just thinking Zoo.
Oh, Zoo.
The only show I've ever rooted for the animals to win in killing everybody.
The animal apocalypse, and everyone rooted for the animals. Okay, well, now that that's over with, let's get to the, I guess the encore. That was the main event. This is our top fives of 2015. Olivia, what is your number 5 best new network show of 2015?
My number 5 was Last Man on Earth.
You're not going to believe this, and I have the list written in front of me. I can screenshot it for you. That's my number 5 as well.
Are you kidding right now?
Not joking.
What the heck?
I'm not joking. Okay, you do. Why is Last Man on Earth your number 5?
I definitely think, okay, so, I can admit, the show definitely had, its faults and things that, I wish it would have done differently, in terms of the pace and just in terms of, direction. But honestly, the pilot was one of, one of the shows that I really just, really connected emotionally with, especially that one scene, and I always bring it back to that one scene where he's sitting in the car with one of his many sports ball buddies that he had from the bar, and he's looking at the mannequin, and, he is envisioning that this is a real woman, and he just needs that human connection so badly that he goes and strikes up a conversation of, he's flirting with a real person, and it just needs that human warmth and connection in a world where he thinks that there are no people. And I thought that that was one of the most genuine, heartfelt, and yet, funny, but in a really just heartbreakingly sad way moment that I've ever seen on television, and that just sold it for me.
I completely agree. I think the first 15 minutes of the Last Man on Earth pilot is the best stretch of television of the year, possibly, definitely on all network TV, possibly including cable. Mad Men ended that year, so maybe not, but there's some Game of Thrones sequences that were really good, but it was up there. It was definitely the best I've seen in a pilot, definitely network TV for the year. The first 15 minutes of this pilot were absolutely beautiful, poetic, sad, amazing. It's just, he's just by himself after the apocalypse trying to live and find some kind of meaning. And that, it was beautiful. What this show fell victim to is not having enough faith in that premise. That the show is called Last Man on Earth. I kind of wish it had been about the last man on Earth. Because, and I totally understand why they did it, and why they introduced a lot more characters and made it sort of into a traditional sitcom in a lot of ways. But man, did this show have something really special with Will Forte just sort of stumbling around by himself. And they very quickly got away from that. And I think that Last Man on Earth kind of stumbled a bit because it didn't have the faith that initial idea was going to work. But honestly, looking back on it, that could have been the show for the first season. He could have literally met no one else. And I think it could have sustained itself for a full season. Because that first 15 minutes was just beautiful and heart-wrenching and funny. And just, it was amazing. So, it ends up as my number 5. Because the show did kind of lose its luster after that. And I think went downhill a bit. It's still not a bad comedy, but it's kind of mediocre and blends in. And, I mean, it's still a decent show, which is why it's on my list. But man, there was something really special here that the show got away from pretty fast.
No, exactly. And I'm just really hyped on, just that moment. And I remember, it was before I graduated, and I was sitting there, and I actually had to go to class, but I was sitting there watching it, and I remember walking outside, and I was just, excited to see people, just because of that one isolated moment that I had seen. So, to be able to take a moment like that and, feel that in your actual life, it takes a really special television show to accomplish that. So, that was this.
Yeah, that was this. A great pilot, a somewhat above average comedy series, but yeah, we'll always have those first 15 minutes. What is your number 4 show?
My number 4 is The Carmichael Show.
Oh, will be appearing on my list in a bit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So what did you like about this one?
I think everything that we talk about, and I think Fresh Off the Boat had the same kind of idea where it was, it had a very progressive tone, but it wasn't holier than thou, and it wasn't preachy in being progressive. It wasn't progressive for the sake of trying to be progressive. They actually had characters who served a purpose and who like really bounced off of each other. There was comedy where there was supposed to be comedy, and like it brought real life situations into this show that just got so like well woven with the entire tone, and it wasn't in your face, and it didn't make you feel crappy for watching it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I'll talk more about it when I get to it, because it might actually be a while before we get to it on my list. But I agree with everything you said. My number 4 show is Empire.
Of course.
Of course. This is a show that the pilot, I was so hyped after the pilot that I was like running around my apartment. The pilot of Empire, and honestly the entire first season is just absolute fire. I loved every minute of it. It is as someone who is inclined towards like hip hop and R&B. I
would never have guessed.
Yeah, I know. I'm full of weird surprises like that. Yeah, I mean, like, I grew up on, like, late 90s hip-hop, like Bad Boy with Puff Daddy, and all, like, there's something very evocative about all this for me. And to see it on television in, like, a sort of nighttime soap about a very, like, Bad Boy-style record company, and it's also a musical, and it just, like, it was so different. And it took television by storm in a way that, like, we haven't seen since Game of Thrones. I mean, the ratings that Empire was doing in the first season, it was doing like 6.0s in the demo, which is completely unheard of nowadays. It might have even got to 7. Like, it was doing like The Voice in its prime numbers. And it's like what Empire represented in terms of diversity. I think it's paved the way for a lot of a new crop of shows with more diverse casts. I think a show like the Carmichael Show might have been helped by Empire. Because networks are realizing that, hey, not everyone in America is white, and maybe
surprise,
and maybe people might like seeing different faces on their television for once, and we don't need to have every show be about white families, and we can expand out a bit, and yeah, so I loved what Empire represented. It was some of the most fun tweeting every week. It also it kind of fell apart in the second season a bit. I think they had one really strong story to tell, and then they got to season 2 and didn't have such a strong story to tell, and it kind of lost a bit of its luster, but that's neither here nor there in this conversation. First season was, I think, awesome. Pilot was awesome. That's what's on my list.
Yes.
Yes. So what is your number 3?
My number 3 is The Grinder.
Oh! That's my number 2. So we'll talk about it. Yeah. What would you like about The Grinder?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, just Rob Lowe, and that just speaks for itself. Like, that's just a standalone. Just, him, especially being in Parks and Rec withdrawal, which will never end. That's the withdrawal that will never ever stop. But seeing him back, just being insane and being, like, completely off the walls and just owning every single moment that he's on screen. On top of his chemistry with Fred Savage, but also just the smart writing of the show. Like, we see so many shows that are like, this is comedy, and it's not, because they're telling you that it's comedy. This is one of those things where they let just the most ridiculous situations play out, and every single moment of it works.
Yeah, it's a single cam sitcom done absolutely right. It's got a great cast, again, led by Rob Lowe, who is awesome. Great chemistry with him and Fred Savage. A great premise for a sort of procedural comedy. I think that single cams work best when you have someone who has a job that can keep creating situations, like almost like a procedural drama, like a CSI, but for comedy. And so they're lawyers, and they get cases, and there's a case of the week, just like a CSI show, but of course this is all comedy. And it's just a really smart show anchored by 2 really great performances. Rob Lowe is obviously the more flashy performance. Fred Savage is doing awesome work, but they're just great together. And it's just sometimes a comedy just works. Sometimes it just works. The premise works, the actors work, the writing works. This was I think just a comedy that worked. And it's actually it's up there in my comedies this year. Again, it's my number 2 show. So yeah, it just worked. And kudos to Fox for putting it on. What is your number? Oh, I have my number 3 show.
What's your number?
I'm out of order here. My number 3 show is Fresh Off the Boat. Which is another of the which I think premiered like right when 2015 started. Honestly, like it premiered a while back, but it's a good, solid show that relies on its diversity well. It also draws from the same well of late 90s hip hop that Empire does, which I appreciated.
Of course.
A traditional sitcom, single cam. But it's just a show that's very smart, I think. Very, very smart in its observations. The pilot was much more pointed than I think a lot of people thought it would be. There's a version of this show that's very, like, downpedaled and very, tame. And I think, Eddie Wong, the person whose memoir this is based off of, kind of feels like that's this version of the show. But as far as network pilots go, even if it is a watered down version of his story, it's still a pretty intense network pilot. There were scenes in this first episode that were pretty boundary pushing in terms of comedy, and I really appreciated that. And I think that it's anchored by some good performances. Constance Wu is really great as the mother. Cool. Yeah, and so I just enjoyed. I mean, it's again a really good comedy that's still on the air and still putting out good episodes. So definitely a win for ABC.
Definitely.
So now, what is your number 2 show?
My number 2 is Grandfathered.
Grandfathered? Stamos!
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 Making the Stamos of it.
Yes.
I kind of was and wasn't expecting to like this show. I kind of, like, was, just based off of the interviews that I saw, and I was like, okay, like, it seems like it has a really, like, solid production. It seems like, it's a really heartfelt premise. This is coming, from a guy who did, 8 years of Full House. So I'm like, obviously he knows what heartwarming family TV is about. But then I watched it and I was like, the whole cast is incredible. Like, they have such incredible chemistry. Like, it doesn't make me feel drained watching it, which is kind of an accomplishment because there are so many network TVs, even if they're supposed to be light, that are just so draining watching because they're not funny and they don't accomplish anything, and they're trying to force everything so heavily that it just becomes so bogged down. Mm-hmm. But when you actually have a show that it's like, the humor speaks for itself, like you have a really diverse cast, again, for the sake of it being diverse, but just because it's well written. And then, having like this enigmatic lead, pushing the entire thing, it just makes for, incredible show overall.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that pilot a lot. I haven't kept up with it the same way that I've kept up with The Grinder, but I mean, what a win for Fox to put on 2 new comedies in the mid-season and have them both be not only like well-received shows, but actually do like okay in the ratings. Pretty good rebound for Fox after sort of breaking up that Tuesday night where they had like mini projects. And Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and it wasn't doing very well in the ratings, but it was critically well received. Now they managed to replace it. So, kudos to Fox. Grandfather's, I think, a good solid comedy. Again, it was a pretty good year for comedies.
Oh, heck yeah.
So what is your number 1 show?
Well, no, what's your number 2?
Oh, yes. I did say it in the last one. I'm all mixed up because we have so much overlap here. My number 2 is The Grinder.
That's it.
It's The Grinder. Again, I said about it, but Rob Lowe is really great, and I'm not going to be the one to deny Chris Traeger. So
never.
Okay, what is your number 1 show? What is your number 1? Your number 1 show.
My number 1 is Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Oh!
I am crazy about this show. I have watched every single episode.
Wow.
Sometimes like 2 or 3 times. I think I've downloaded most of the songs.
Oh my gosh.
It's everything about this show, and especially after, Rachel Bloom was recognized, for her Emmy, for her performance. Everything about this show it's so smart, and it's so well written, and just so self-aware, and, it has a character, who is messy and she's complicated, and like none of her actions are like excusable, but it makes sense. Like, it's taking social conventions and it's completely calling kind of BS out for what it is in society in terms of sexism and things like that. And just everything about this is something that I would never expect to see on a network comedy.
Yeah, I had no idea that you had completely fallen in love with the show, and I'm delighted by it.
Oh, it's beyond in love at this point.
That's great. Yeah, Rachel Bloom is fantastic in it, and I should have in retrospect figured it out because it's like a musical, And
I know.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, this is it could not be more up your alley. So that's great though. Yeah, it was definitely in consideration for my top 5. I'm excited that you've actually found like one of your favorite shows out of our network pilots.
Did.
Yeah, it's a show that is critically beloved. Not a ton of viewers, but it's on the CW, so who knows. But okay, so my number 1 show has already been mentioned, but I didn't talk about it. It's Limitless Be Coops!
I knew! I knew that was going to be on your list. I did not think it was going to be number 1.
It's not Limitless. It's not Limitless. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Did you really?
It's not Limitless. I just wanted to make my Be Coops joke.
The fact that I wouldn't have actually been surprised.
I know. Oh, what am I doing with my life? You weren't even surprised that I put Limitless number 1.
I wasn't. I was expecting that to be on the list at some point.
I have no credibility. To be fair, completely fair of you to think that, because I really would have. It's something I would have done. But no, my number 1 show is the Carmichael Show.
Yeah,
that's my number 1. I think of to me. I'm looking at my list here. Like, Last Man on Earth is a show that was transcendent for 15 minutes and then became a very traditional comedy. Fresh Off the Boat takes a quote-unquote untraditional cast and puts them in a rather traditional comedy. The writing, again, is a little bit edgy, but it's still a traditional comedy. The Grinder is a very well-executed version of the kind of traditional procedural, job-oriented comedy. The Carmichael Show is traditional, but it's traditional in a different tradition. It is traditional in the sort of straight talk, issues-oriented comedy that hasn't been on TV for 20 years. It's a throwback to a time in which this stuff was okay to talk about on network television, and I think we've just taken for granted that it's not. And what the Carmichael Show does so well, and in a way that other quote-unquote issues shows stumble on, or a way that a Seth MacFarlane show, like that horrible Border Town, that show takes an issue and it hides behind a bush 50 yards away and it takes pot shots at it with a slingshot, and it doesn't do any damage. Carmichael Show runs right up to it and punches it in the face.
Yeah.
It is a show that deals headlong with the issues. It's not afraid to joke about things that are very serious, that are inherently serious. The second episode, I believe, was the Black Lives Matter episode. And it's taking this issue. It's just a very traditional family. It's the father, the mother, the son, who is Carmichael, and his wife. And then, the brother and his wife. So that's it. And they're just sitting in a room and they talk about it. And the secret is the performances, which are across the board awesome, especially the parents. And then also, the writing is just, it feels so current. It feels like these people are talking like actual people talk. And on top of it, it manages to be funny as well. So it's taking things that are not inherently funny, diving deep, taking them on headlong, and finding the humor in them. And that is something that hasn't happened on TV for 2 decades. And I think that to me is why, even though these other shows are great and funny, Carmichael Show is actually a real, it's something that's real. There's something real here that I hope is allowed to continue, and I hope more shows take advantage of. And so, hats off to Gerard Carmichael for making, I think, probably a pretty low budget, a really special show, and how different it is, and how different it is from everything else on TV. So that's why it's my number 1 show.
I 1000% agree.
All right, Olivia, we did it.
We did it.
we have counted down our top 5. We hope you enjoyed this 2 months late, and that you will rejoin us when shows start premiering again. I don't even know when that is. Hopefully I'll be over this cold by then. I'm about to die from talking for this long, but that's okay. Yeah. I'm struggling. Yeah. So, do you have any messages for the people, to hold them over for the next 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, however long?
Oh my gosh, however long it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just be patient. New things are coming back. Definitely rewatch some old episodes of, our top 5, because these are really awesome shows in preparation for, when things kick back up again. And yeah, we'll be back hopefully in a few weeks.
Yeah, a message
with more
of calm.
stuff to talk about.
A message of calm for the people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, you can always listen to our old episodes in our iTunes feed. Search for tvbenches.com Pilot Roundtable. We finally got a new logo, so you can check out our new logo in the iTunes feed. And that's it. So you've been listening to the Pilot Roundtable, a tvbenches.com and Southgate Media Group production. You can listen to all of our episodes on iTunes, where you can rate and review us. We'd appreciate that. Or find us at southgatemediagroup.com. Follow Olivia on Twitter at Richards Olivia, and me on Twitter at Kyle Loves TV. Until next time.